This video is now in session, and the House Democrats passed a January 6th commission. So it's meant to serve like a 9/11 commission, except for the January 6th insurrection attacks that happened on the U.S. Capitol. The vote was around 252 to 175, with 35 Republicans joining with Democrats to vote for this bill. Now, 35 Republicans normally seems like a lot for a bipartisan bill these days, but it was expected to be a lot more. Until Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, and Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate, said that they do not support the bill. And from there, they started lobbying against the bill by calling potential representatives and potential senators who might be in favor of this bill and saying why you should not vote for this bill. And ultimately, it's not really a good look for Republicans, and it's kind of surprising that Republicans are having trouble of voting for a bill like this, which is meant to do something as simple as creating a commission to investigate the January 6th attacks. There's nothing much partisan about that. There's nothing troublesome behind it, yet they are against it. And it's mainly, again, their devotion to Donald Trump. And in some ways, it's a devotion to Donald Trump's fans, to his base, because there are still a lot of people who support Trump. And what Republicans are trying to do is to make sure that those groups of voters are not alienated for the 2022 election. The problem is, though, that by pandering to just this one group of voter, then they're not going to be able to have a easy time of winning the House in 2022. We've said before that Republicans are almost definitely going to win the House, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's an impossible chance for Democrats to retain the House. It's not impossible, but the thing is, though, that Republicans, in some ways, the House Republicans, are making it easier and a little bit easier for Democrats to retain the majority of the House. They have around a 10% chance of retaining the House, and while that may seem like a very low shot, Donald Trump had a 10% chance of winning the presidency in 2020, and he was only just around 55,000 votes away from actually winning the election. All he needed were the tilt states from Biden, Wisconsin, Arizona, and as well as Georgia. If he had that, he would have enough electoral votes to beat Joe Biden. So obviously, 10% chance. Even though it's low, it's not impossible for Democrats to retain the House. But there are specific things that Democrats have to do to retain the House, and they will have to rely on these GOP kind of screw ups and defiance of what happened in Trump's presidency in order to win. And luckily for Democrats, the GOP is screwing up pretty often. And feasibly speaking, this midterm election, is probably the best chance the Democrats have at a midterm election, with the presidency being Democratic, to actually retain the House and to even flip seats in the House. In 2010, in 2014, both of these elections under Obama, Democrats lost the House and Republicans retained the House in 2014. And then if we go back even further, 1996, 1992, 1998, both of these elections went for Republicans under Bill Clinton. So it's obvious that Democrats have not had a good streak, but they can replicate something similar to what George Bush did in 2002, where he bucked the trend and actually gained seats in the House. Usually, the incumbent party, whoever is in the presidency, and that party loses the majority or loses seats in the House when it comes to midterm elections. But in this case, or in 2002, George W. Bush was able to flip seats to Republicans. And that was because of 9/11. It was because 9/11 helped unify the nation towards George W. Bush, and thus he was able to have high popularity at the time of the election, and he was able to get more seats in the House. And the same thing could potentially happen with Joe Biden. That said, Democrats need to do several things in order to do that. They first obviously have to take advantage of this vote and say that Republicans are not even in their heads about what happened in 2020 and as well as January 6th, that they are not even acknowledging that this kind of tragedy took place. And then from there, Democrats need to do more than just that, because obviously it is a message, but it's not a winning message for such a hard election. The second thing they need to do is they have to pass the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. They have to get it through Congress, which is very hard to do, but if they're able to do it, then it will be pretty good for Democrats, because this infrastructure plan first is approved of by the majority of Americans. 58% of Americans approve of the Biden infrastructure plan, the American Jobs and Families Plan. And of those, 19% of Republicans approve it. And ultimately, this bill, while we have not endorsed it, and we probably will not endorse it, ultimately what it does do is provide jobs and provide infrastructure. And if we're relying on past precedent, if we're relying on history around the world, it says that whenever the economy cannot improve by itself through the economy, when the economy cannot improve by itself, then infrastructure is the best way to boost the economy. And this is what many people have taken. This is what the United States took in the 1940s when Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the Federal Highway Act. Infrastructure is the same thing that helped revitalize France. It was the same thing that helped propel China into a much more of a first world country than a third world country. Between 1970 and right now in 2021, they've invested a lot in infrastructure, and as a result, urbanization started promulgating, and the economy of China started booming. So we see through these examples how infrastructure can vastly help a nation, and there is no better time for the United States to invest in infrastructure than right now, where there are not as many people on our roads, on our transportation systems, and all of those and all of our transportation is currently crumbling. So by passing the Biden infrastructure plan, it's almost definitely going to be very highly approved of by the American public. So not only would it do that, it would also create jobs and obviously grow the economy. And that's objectively speaking, again, from history. If we look at history is never wrong, and and many times it can be applied over and over again. So by passing the American Jobs and Families Plan, then that's the second pillar for the success of Democrats. The third thing they need to do is they have to target target freshman House Republicans. There were many of those in the 2020 election. And many of them actually had those seats in 2018 before Democrats flipped it in 2018, and then Republicans, sometimes the same representatives, flipped it back to being Republican in 2020. Example right here, you've got Harrell. Representative Harrell was the former representative from until 2018, and then you can see here Representative Small won in 2018, and then Representative Harrell won again in 2020 from Democrats. So those are the kinds of seats that Democrats should try to focus on. I mean, they can try to focus on getting seats that they tried to flip in 2020 but were not successful, like Texas's 24th district, or potentially Brian Fitzpatrick's seat in Pennsylvania's 1st district. But these two districts and districts similar to those, first, they're going to get redistricted into more of Republican-favored seats. But not only that, but also it's not productive for Democrats to focus on those seats, because what they need to do is they have to structure their attack so that it's focused in several places. If they go across the board and if they spread the money out, then they're ultimately not going to be able to gain as much seats, because the quality of campaigns will decrease. and they need really high quality campaigns, because Republicans don't have to do that much to actually get the majority in the House. So so in terms of seats that they should be focusing on, they should be focusing on New Mexico's 2nd district, as well as the 2 districts in Orange County that flipped for Republicans, that flipped for Young Kim in 39th district, and then 48th district, I believe, Michelle Steele. They can also try to flip this seat back to being Democratic with David Villado in California's 21st district, and then they can try for this seat with redistricting by the Democrats, with gerrymandering by the Democrats, so that they can get Anthony Brindisi back onto the House. So those are the seats that they really should be focusing on. The quote easiest pickups by Democrats, which doesn't mean it's easy, but rather it's feasible for Democrats to pick them up without doing too much spending. So those are the 3 strategies that Democrats should really be taking. But lastly, I mean, if they want to go against these candidates, then they have to bring a message that these candidates are simply not voting for their constituents, and rather they are voting for the National Republican Party, and using the first strategy, which is branding the House Republicans as nonsensical group of morons, then they're able to then portray these House members who have voted against bills like the January 6th Commission as part of the National Republican Party. And those are the strategies that Democrats have to take to, at the very least, have a somewhat okay chance at retaining the House. Obviously, though, they're not going to be favored to win the House anytime soon. Certainly, it isn't impossible like most things in politics, but it's very hard for Democrats to still win out. But the GOP is making it easier by the day, or at least somewhat opening the door for Democrats to retain the House in 2022. And that's important for Democrats because if they want to gain power in Washington, then they have to win 2022. And not only do they have to retain the House, but they also have to gain seats in the Senate, at least 2 Senate seats. And if they're able to gain 2 Senate seats while holding their own Senate seats, then what they can do is pass bills, more progressive bills like DC statehood or the For the People Act, and that would make it easier for Democrats to both retain the Senate in the future, but also have a voting bill that will make it easier for their constituents and as well as the Republicans' constituents to vote. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.